You ever meet someone, and within seconds, something inside you screams, "Nope, I don't like them," even if they haven't done anything wrong? That reaction isn't random. Modern studies show first impressions form in less than a single heartbeat. Your brain runs a rapid safety check before you've even had a conscious thought. In this video, you'll see the exact habits that silently repel others, the traits that create instant magnetism, and one mindset shift to test in your very next conversation. For now, try noticing what happens in your body the moment a stranger enters the room. Because what feels like intuition is really ancient wiring still driving your first judgments today. Why your brain still judges in seconds. Our brains may feel modern, but the way they size up strangers is still rooted in a primitive survival system. Within a tenth of a second, people form impressions of traits like trustworthiness or competence. And brain scans show the amygdala helps make those calls before logic even enters the picture. That means by the time you're aware of someone, your nervous system has already delivered its report. Think of the amygdala like an ancient alarm bell. It wasn't built to weigh resumes, analyze tone of voice, or appreciate the subtleties of small talk. It was built to spot threat fast. When you meet someone new, it combs through microscopic cues. The arch of an eyebrow, the split-second delay before a smile, the slight lean of posture. Notice how you feel it rather than think it. A slight tightening in the stomach, a quick change in your breathing, a flicker of unease that seems to appear from nowhere. That's the survival circuit firing. This is where pattern recognition takes over. Your brain carries thousands of tiny blueprints collected over a lifetime, many inherited through millions of years of human evolution. A wavering tone might remind you of uncertainty you've heard before. A gesture could resemble past aggression, or a mismatched expression may trigger caution. These comparisons happen so quickly they bypass conscious reasoning. You don't decide whether someone feels safe, you just sense it, as if the decision is handed to you fully formed. Imagine walking into a party. Across the room, a stranger catches your eye. Their smile is a little tight, their gaze lingers a beat too long. Before you've had time to say hello, something inside nudges you back. Your body adjusts. Maybe you don't walk directly toward them. Maybe you keep your distance. Later, you might explain it to yourself as they seemed arrogant, or something was off. But the truth is, that judgment formed long before you put words to it. The takeaway here is simple. First impressions arrive instantly, but they don't have to be permanent. Once you recognize what's happening, you gain the power to pause rather than lock the door. The triggers for this system can be surprisingly small. A step closer than expected might read as dominance. Laughter that doesn't land quite on time feels false. A flicker in eye contact can spark discomfort. None of this requires analysis. It's absorbed through sensory input and converted into gut-level feelings. You don't need to tell yourself to be wary. Your system has already leaned that way before you even considered responding. And here's the twist. These reactions reveal more about you than the other person. The filter is built from your history, your culture, your conditioning. It flags danger because being overly cautious once meant survival. That's why you can dislike someone instantly even though they've done nothing wrong. It's your own algorithms echoing through time. Now layer modern life onto this ancient process. Every day, we swipe through endless photos, scroll past hundreds of faces on screens, and absorb clips where expressions shift in the blink of an eye. Each image runs through the same evolved circuitry. Someone's tone in a 10-second video feels off, or a glance caught mid-frame looks insincere. Your brain reacts as strongly to those snapshots as it would to someone standing an arm's length away. This flood of impressions is relentless compared to the handful of strangers our ancestors encountered in their lives. What makes all this so ironic is that today's society depends on cooperation and connection. Yet our neural architecture is still running survival scripts written for life on the edge of danger. Whether it's a coworker, a potential partner, or someone new in your community, your brain isn't asking, "Do I find them interesting?" It's asking, "Safe or not?" And often, that decision lands before a single word passes between you. That's why some interactions feel doomed before they start. Someone says perfectly normal things, but you're already on guard. You can't quite put your finger on it. You just didn't take to them. Almost always, that comes from the survival system calling something's off, before your mind could even evaluate. Most of the time, it isn't about them at all. It's about the alarm bell echoing inside. Here's where awareness changes everything. The instant dislike that flashes up isn't proof someone is untrustworthy. It's evidence that your brain is running rapid threat detection in the background. Sometimes that instinct does protect you, but often it's just friction from old wiring applied to safe, ordinary situations. When you remember that, the impression loses some of its grip. Instead of closing the door immediately, you get a chance to leave it ajar, letting actual experience shape your opinion. A big mistake many people make is assuming their gut reactions are flawless. "I just knew they weren't honest" feels convincing, but often it simply reflects the brain's habit of filling gaps with caution. Those flashes are survival reflexes, not crystal balls. They can help, but they can just as easily block connection before you even try. In daily interactions, recognizing this can make you more patient. A colleague might seem standoffish at first glance, or a date might initially feel cold. Before rushing to judgment, realize what's happening in your own circuitry. Those micro cues triggering the reaction were crucial long ago, but today they can work against you just as often as they protect you. The choice is to reframe them. Instead of treating the alarm as truth, treat it as feedback, raw sensory input from a system that values safety first, accuracy second. That shift helps you separate ancient reaction from thoughtful judgment. You may never stop your brain from firing that first impression, but you can stop treating it as the final word. And that leads us to an important question. If such instincts are automatic, then what subtle behaviors, often invisible to the conscious mind, are sparking these instant alarms in others? Because sometimes, without meaning to, the smallest things we do create unease before we've even spoken. The silent red flags that repel people. Silent red flags are the subtle cues that trigger unease before anyone realizes why. They're not obvious insults or aggressive gestures. They're microslips, tiny flashes of mismatch between what's shown and what's really felt. And because your brain is wired to hunt for congruence, even the slightest inconsistency can come across as a warning. Let's break down a few of the most common ones, their effects, and quick shifts you can try right away. The first is microexpressions. These are brief flashes of emotion, anger, doubt, irritation, that cross the face in less than half a second. Most people don't consciously spot them, but your subconscious brain does. When someone says all the right words but their eyes narrow or their mouth tightens for a split second, you don't register microexpression. You just feel something doesn't add up. Fake consistency feels unsafe. The fix: practice what psychologists call a soft jaw microsmile. Instead of forcing wide grins, keep the jaw relaxed and allow a slight, natural smile to rise for a few seconds. It signals that your expression matches your words and removes that gut-level suspicion. The second red flag is jittery or restless body language. Finger tapping, bouncing knees, shifting from side to side. All of these read as tension. Even if you're just burning off nervous energy, the other person's brain interprets you as unstable or unpredictable. Since unpredictability used to mean danger, small fidgets can still feel unsettling today. The quick fix: deliberately slow your rhythm. Drop both feet flat on the ground. Keep your hands still for a few beats. Then let gestures emerge deliberately. Try this experiment. Move at about 80% of your usual pace. It comes across as grounded and calm, not stiff. A third is what could be called pasted-on smiles or forced enthusiasm. Everyone has met someone who laughs a little too loud or flashes a grin that lingers too long. Instead of warmth, it comes across as forced charm. The subconscious effect is distrust. Exaggeration feels less like openness and more like cover. The fix is counterintuitive. Only smile when you actually feel it. And if you want to signal openness during conversation, use the 20% eye contact rhythm. That means maintaining direct eye contact about a fifth of the time, then glancing away naturally. It feels engaged but not overwhelming, and combined with authentic microexpressions, it brings trust. Closely related is delayed laughter or off-timed reactions. If someone laughs half a beat after everyone else, and louder than the moment justifies, it feels rehearsed. The subconscious reads it as compensating rather than connecting. That mismatch triggers low-level mistrust because the timing is off. The one-line fix: allow your response to match the weight of the moment. A small, quiet chuckle at the right second is far more effective than delayed bursts. When in doubt, stay subtle. The brain recognizes genuine timing more than it values sheer volume of reaction. Another red flag is inconsistent signals between voice and body. Maybe your tone is supportive, but your shoulders are slightly turned away. Or your words are calm, but your pitch rises sharply toward the end as if you're seeking approval. Even tiny mismatches like these create unease because, again, they signal contradiction. the subconscious wonders, which signal do I trust? The fast fix: pause before speaking and align posture with tone. If your words are relaxed, let your shoulders ease down and keep gestures slow. Consistency between channels creates instant comfort. Notice how all of these carry the same theme. They represent disconnect between inner state and outer signal. Human beings are finely tuned detectors of those gaps. Our ancestors had to decide quickly whether another tribe member was hiding aggression, so spotting even a flicker of inconsistency became crucial. Today, those same instincts keep firing, not against predators, but in everyday social or professional interaction. You can't stop people from sensing, but you can reduce the contradictions you unconsciously send. So what can you actually do about it in simple, practical terms? Begin with slowing down. A single deep breath buys you time to steady micro-movements. That prevents jittery habits from setting off alarms. Next, let your face settle into neutral softness instead of constantly pushing smiles. When a genuine laugh or smile arises, it will feel congruent, not performed. Align tone with posture by holding stillness while speaking. And finally, replace frantic eye contact with that 20% rhythm. It ensures presence without overwhelming or underconnecting. Think of how this plays out daily. In a workplace meeting, jittery pen taps don't register as focused brainstorming. Colleagues' nervous systems sense distraction or unease. Simply setting the pen down and resting your hands steady changes the signal entirely. You move from restless to stable without saying a word. On a first date, an overlong grin isn't read as charm. It reads as anxiety wearing a mask. Allowing a natural microsmile paired with grounded body stillness projects ease instead of desperation. These small, almost invisible shifts create the impression of trustworthiness before your words take effect. The benefit of recognizing these silent red flags is twofold. First, you stop blaming yourself for bad vibes. When conversations don't flow, you can recognize they often come from nonverbal mismatches. Second, you gain immediate, low-effort tools to shift them. Instead of memorizing tricks to be charismatic, it's more about subtraction. Remove the contradictions. Consistency is magnetic. A useful way to train this is through short, practical experiments. Next time you're in conversation, try keeping your hands motionless for 60 seconds. Let gestures happen only when words need emphasis. You'll notice how quickly the overall energy of the interaction shifts. The other person won't know why they feel calmer around you, but they will. That experiment alone demonstrates how silent red flags can be flipped into silent signals of security. And that brings us to the broader picture. Because while reducing red flags helps you avoid instant rejection, there's another side: the qualities that make someone naturally stand out. Some people walk into a room and, without effort, draw attention. Others slip by unnoticed. The difference comes down to presence, how energy and signals combine the moment someone steps forward. Magnetic energy: why some people command a room. Some people seem almost invisible until they speak, while others are noticed the moment they arrive. This isn't about who talks the loudest or flashes the brightest smile. It comes down to what psychologists often describe as magnetic energy, the signals of calm certainty that draw others without effort. Magnetic presence isn't added through tricks. It's expressed through how your body, your voice, and your movements align. The first foundation of that presence is grounded posture. Humans instinctively read posture as a sign of safety. A person standing with hunched shoulders, shifting weight, or constantly adjusting broadcasts subtle messages of insecurity. By contrast, someone with relaxed shoulders, balanced stance, and open chest communicates stability. Some studies suggest posture may even influence mental states, though the evidence is still debated. What is clear is that practical grounding practices, like taking a deep breath, keeping both feet firm on the floor, and letting the chest expand slightly, help most people feel and appear calmer. A simple micro-exercise. Stand wherever you are, drop your shoulders, place your elbows a few inches away from your ribs, and breathe slowly for 60 seconds. Notice how different the body feels when it isn't collapsing inward. That small reset creates signals of composure your nervous system, and others can register immediately. The second element is vocal pacing. Voice communicates far more than words. Quick, rushed speech produces tension in listeners. It creates a perception of neediness, as if the speaker is chasing approval. Calm pacing does the opposite. Deliberate pauses and steady tones convey confidence and control. People instinctively lean in when silence is held with comfort. Charismatic individuals often practice this intuitively, but anyone can train it. The practice is simple, a 3-breath pause. Before you begin speaking, inhale and exhale fully 3 times. This slows the rhythm of your nervous system, so your words emerge measured, not scattered. During conversation, allow 1 extra half-second of silence after finishing a point. That tiny delay adds weight to what you've said rather than inviting interruption. Over time, this micro-habit reshapes how others experience your presence, and it eases your own internal pressure as well. The third key is movement style, sometimes described as prey versus predator energy. It has nothing to do with domination and everything to do with stillness. A person who shifts, scans their surroundings constantly, or darts their eyes appears to be on alert. That triggers in others the feeling that something may be wrong. By contrast, someone who moves deliberately, keeps their gaze steady, and doesn't rush communicates security. Listeners unconsciously register. This person isn't hunted, therefore they must not be threatened. A quick exercise makes the difference tangible. As you walk into a room, slow your pace by about 20%, keep your head level, and consciously pause before your first movement or word. It takes less than 15 seconds, but it shifts how you're read. Instead of anxious scanning, you project calm command, making you the emotional anchor for everyone else. These 3 elements, posture, pacing, stillness, combine into a feedback loop. When your body steadies, your breath settles too. When your voice slows, your mind feels less frantic. Others sense these shifts and relax, which reinforces your own calm. One concise example: picture a team meeting. The person tapping their pen, leaning forward nervously, and speaking too quickly may have brilliant ideas, but the delivery dilutes them. Another person, sitting back with grounded shoulders, speaking after a short pause, instantly feels more credible. Even without equal experience, the second is remembered as authoritative. This is not about faking dominance. It is about removing habits that signal unease, so presence can emerge naturally. It's easy to think magnetism requires constant effort, bigger gestures, more jokes, endless smiling. But what research and so many real interactions show is the opposite. Reducing misaligned signals has greater impact than adding new ones. Grounded stillness, steady speech, and deliberate movement signal congruence. People feel safer, and safety is what draws attention most reliably. The person who doesn't need the spotlight often becomes the one others look toward anyway. These practices also reframe how you view social energy. Instead of working harder to be charismatic, you experiment with subtle resets that change how both body and voice carry you. A 1-minute centering breath before a meeting. A gentle reminder to lift the chest and ease the jaw before entering a gathering. A pause for 3 breaths before answering a question. These adjustments may seem small, but they accumulate into an energy others can't help but notice. The effect is not that you impose yourself onto a room. It's that you enter without contradiction, and people's attention naturally settles on that clarity. Charisma, then, isn't a fixed trait. It's a series of physical and vocal habits that either scatter energy or anchor it. And because humans are wired to follow stability, anchoring yourself first is enough to shift perception instantly. Some people adopt the habits consciously, others discover them by accident, but the mechanism is the same. Congruence commands attention. As with any practice, consistency matters more than the occasional performance. 1 deep breath here, and there won't change much on its own. But repeated signals of grounded ease start to form an identity others recognize. Soon, people expect you to be the steady one, an association that extends trust and credibility before you say a word. The practical side of all this is encouraging. Developing magnetic energy isn't about changing personality, exaggerating gestures, or memorizing scripts. It's about realigning simple actions, grounding your stance, pacing your voice, slowing your movements. These actions don't make you someone else. They reveal the calmer presence already there when nervous habits are stripped away. And while this magnetic presence works in direct, face-to-face settings, it's important to recognize that modern life has shifted the stage. Attention today doesn't just happen inside meeting rooms or social gatherings. Environments shaped by screens and algorithms now play just as much of a role in deciding who stands out and who fades into the background. The same nervous systems trained to notice posture and pacing are now adapting to something much shorter, moments that can determine likability in just a few seconds. Social media's new influence on charisma. Social media has reshaped how we understand charisma. What once unfolded over minutes of conversation is now compressed into a handful of moments. because platforms have trained our brains to decide almost instantly who seems worth our attention. TikTok, Instagram, and similar apps reward snap judgments, and this conditioning follows us into daily life. Faces, tones, and gestures are measured in seconds, and impressions can form before a word carries through. This shift creates what can be called algorithm charisma, the kind of presence that mirrors what succeeds online. It favors fast readability, clear expressions, quick vocal variation, and gestures that land immediately. People who lean into exaggerated smiles or emphasize tone right away often don't realize why they do it. Their minds are acting as though each interaction is being scored by the same invisible system that governs digital feeds. The pattern is clear. Offline, someone who projects crisp enthusiasm in the first breath often feels magnetic because our brains recognize those same cues from successful online creators. Units of expression once used for media performance have crossed fully into real life. But the danger is that algorithm charisma has a short shelf life. Just as people swipe away from a video after a flashy opening that delivers no substance, face-to-face attention evaporates if the burst of energy doesn't evolve into something more genuine. At work events and social gatherings, it's easy to spot this difference. One person launches with a bold opener, animated gestures, and a wide smile, capturing quick attention. Another arrives more quietly, plants their stance, and lets their grounded demeanor surface over time. In the moment, the first may win the swipe-style approval, but the second builds steadier trust as minutes pass. The contrast doesn't make one right and the other wrong, but it does demonstrate two competing forces: immediate brightness and sustained depth. We may be tempted to overvalue speed because online conditioning rewards it, yet depth remains irreplaceable. Even institutions have adapted to this compressed standard. Job recruitment clips, branding videos, and dating profiles are deliberately cut for 3-second captures. The effect is subtle but widespread. People internalize the belief that if they don't impress immediately, they will be overlooked. A candidate may lean too heavily into extra-friendly greetings, fearing that without warmth in the very first handshake, they'll be discarded. A date may laugh too quickly or too loudly, unconsciously attempting to simulate instant chemistry. These moments often feel unnatural because they are rehearsed under the influence of digital rules rather than arising from authentic connection. Research highlights why this matters. People form impressions of online profiles in less than 1 second, and those judgments guide whether others even bother to learn more. This single fact explains the urgency. By the time you meet someone offline, their mind may already be leaning toward a conclusion shaped long before. They glimpsed your photo, your words, or your tone on a feed, and their survival brain locked in a stance. Offline introductions are no longer clean slates. They are sequels to digital first impressions. This context helps us see both risk and opportunity. Optimizing for clarity, warmth, and readability early in interactions gives you an advantage, because people are expecting those signals. But over-optimization reduces trust. Digital body language research now warns against polishing to the point of sameness. Repetitive profile styles, generic phrases, or overly staged pictures can backfire, leading to impressions of inauthenticity. Just as in person, contradictions between surface and substance spark unease. Online, the cues come not from shifting posture, but from copy and paste bios, hyper-edited selfies, and messages that feel manufactured. In short, while algorithms train us to reward sharp openings, they also punish anything that feels too mechanical. The solution is balance. Instead of rejecting algorithm charisma entirely or performing it to exhaustion, you can blend its strengths with a deeper authenticity. Express energy clearly in the opening seconds, but don't inflate it. Signal warmth, but resist putting on a smile that outlasts real feeling. Use vocal variation for clarity rather than spectacle. The momentary impression should match what follows, not stand apart as a mask. That's where charisma shifts from fleeting to sustainable. Practical guidelines make this far easier to apply. First, set up your visual presence as you would for a video call or digital profile. Keep the camera at eye level and lighting clear. Small adjustments here prevent subconscious downgrades that come from poorly framed visuals. Second, decide how quickly you want to respond to messages, because timing itself communicates. A rushed reply may feel needy, while delayed silence may read as avoidant. Consistency is key. It builds reliability. Third, remember that clarity mixed with small imperfections feels more trustworthy than flawless polish. A slightly uneven laugh, or a natural pause offers humanity. Too much smoothing creates suspicion. These rules act as anchors in both digital and real encounters, keeping your presence engaging without feeling staged. Once you recognize how this applies in everyday life, interactions start to change. A colleague who launches every meeting with exaggerated cheer begins to seem less intimidating once you see the digital logic behind their style. They're replicating the techniques that thrive on feeds, even if no screen is present. A friend who posts overly curated content, yet speaks with warmth in person, stops seeming inconsistent when you realize these are simply adaptations to two overlapping environments. Recognizing algorithm charisma at work lets you choose your response. Either mirror it lightly for smoother engagement or counterbalance with grounded steadiness that others may secretly crave. Both options keep you intentional instead of reactive. What matters is catching yourself when online conditioning sneaks into offline moments without consent. If you sit across from someone and sense that your smile feels glued or your laughter is exaggerated, you're probably unconsciously optimizing. That awareness allows you to pause and realign, so your first few seconds still hold attention, but don't betray your true energy. Charisma in this age does not require disguising yourself. It asks for clarity matched by congruence. The broader lesson is that charisma now lives on two linked stages: digital feeds and physical spaces. Both use rapid impression systems, powered by the same survival circuitry outlined earlier. The cues differ slightly, but the stakes are shared. Does your presence invite attention or dismissal in moments? Those who understand the influence of the digital stage gain an advantage, because they no longer stumble into interactions unprepared. They shape introductions consciously, whether through a profile photo, a tone of voice, or a grounded pause. When you bring substance beneath those openings, trust follows. Magnetic presence isn't about tricking the nervous system into liking you for 3 seconds. It's about aligning the fast impression with the reality that unfolds afterward. Done well, algorithm charisma becomes less like a mask and more like a lens, something that clarifies rather than distorts who you are. And this leads to a challenge we face in person. Sometimes, in trying to appear confident, people overshoot. Instead of presence, they project pressure. Instead of grounded assurance, they deliver rehearsed overstatements. These moments don't pull others in, they push them away. Understanding that line, between steady confidence and compensatory display, is where charisma either deepens or collapses. Confidence versus overcompensation. Picture this. You sit down across from someone you've just met, and within a few minutes, the conversation starts to feel heavy. They mention where they went to school, then their job title, twice. A well-known name gets dropped in casually, followed by another. Pretty soon, what should feel like a light-hearted introduction shifts into a performance. Instead of easing into knowing them, you feel as though they're pitching themselves. And while they probably intend to show confidence, what comes through is something very different. Here's why. The brain is wired to favor authenticity. When someone's behavior and inner state match, we read them as consistent and trustworthy. When there's a gap, when their words feel like effortful packaging instead of natural sharing, it signals insecurity. Overcompensation is one of the clearest forms of that mismatch. Authentic confidence says, "I'm steady in who I am, with or without your approval." Overcompensation says, "I don't believe I measure up, so I'm going to stack the scales with proof." Even if the stories are polished, the energy underneath communicates need, and people sense it instantly. Let's make this contrast vivid. Imagine an interview. The first candidate sits down and launches into an uninterrupted list. Degrees, awards, accolades, credentials. Every sentence aims to impress. By the 3-minute mark, they sound like they're auditioning for validation. Now imagine the second candidate. They listen carefully, wait for a question, then describe one project with clarity. What the challenge was, how they solved it, and what they learned. They speak steadily, leave space, and trust the story to carry weight. The first candidate works hard to dazzle. The second holds ground calmly. Most people find themselves drawn to the second, even though the resume may not look as shiny on the surface. Name-dropping works in a similar way. 1 or 2 mentions can create common ground, but layering in a famous. Contact with every sentence feels transparent. It gives the impression that the person doubts their own credibility, so they borrow it from others. Strangely, this usually backfires. The more they do it, the less present they appear on their own. Contrast that with someone who rarely talks about connections, but when asked for context, casually mentions a notable experience. Because they don't overemphasize it, the detail lands more strongly, leaving respect rather than resistance. Boasting follows the same pattern. If it's a story offered to share perspective, people stay engaged. If it's a string of highlights trotted out to signal worth, it feels hollow. Often, what happens next is telling. Another person responds with a boast of their own, and the conversation slowly shifts into one-upmanship. Instead of bonding, both walk away drained, sensing the exchange revolved more around ego protection than connection. By contrast, you can feel authentic confidence even when nothing is being said. It shows in steady eye contact, relaxed tone, the absence of restless fidgeting, and the comfort someone displays with silence. They don't force proof on you because they don't need to. Their presence communicates assurance more strongly than any list of credentials. The difference lies not in achievements themselves, but in the energy with which they're carried. This doesn't just play out in professional contexts. In friendships or dating, overselling creates the same effect. Think of someone you've met who keeps lacing casual conversation with big achievements, perhaps exaggerating a past success or emphasizing material markers of worth. Instead of feeling closer, you sense subtle pressure, as though you're being asked to validate them rather than genuinely connect. Confidence makes people feel safe. Overcompensation tends to create distance. There's also a difference in how the two respond to mistakes. The confident person shrugs off a misspoken line, laughs briefly, and moves forward. The overcompensator corrects themselves nervously, lingers, explaining again why they really do know, and in the process confirms the very doubt they were trying to patch over. Ironically, the effort to appear flawless erodes trust. We instinctively respect someone more when they can acknowledge imperfection without spiraling. A research-grounded point helps explain this. Studies in psychology consistently show that honesty and behavioral consistency are core predictors of trust. It isn't perfection that makes others lean in, it's congruence. When what people present matches what they embody, we relax. When the signals feel rehearsed or inflated, we recoil, even if we can't explain why. Overcompensation violates that basic need for coherence, communicating anxiety long before the words finish landing. So here's a small experiment to try when the urge to brag comes up. Before adding another detail, pause for 2 seconds and ask, am I sharing this for connection or for validation? That quick question makes the difference visible. If it feels like validation, try reframing into one clean line that highlights learning rather than status. For example, instead of saying, I was chosen out of 500 people for this elite program, you might say, I'm grateful I had the chance to work on this project because it taught me X. The first chases approval. The second shares growth. One pushes, the other invites. Practical guidance reinforces this. Hold silence for a moment rather than filling it with another self-promotion. Use body cues, steady breath, relaxed shoulders, to signal comfort without words. Replace exaggerated details with simple, present-tense phrases. This is something I've been exploring lately. Or, I'm proud of what I learned there. These feel lighter, shorter, and far easier to receive. They keep connection at the center, while still honoring what you've done. This approach reframes the experience altogether. Instead of trying to win people with credentials, you allow the interaction itself to reassure them. Instead of offering a barrage of evidence, you demonstrate steadiness in small actions. Gradually, people start reading you as trustworthy not because of what you declare, but because of how you carry yourself. The paradox fades away. Real confidence requires less work, not more. The benefit of practicing this is cumulative. In interviews, it prevents overload and shows you can prioritize what matters most. In relationships, it leaves others feeling lighter and more comfortable, not pressured. In casual settings, it makes conversations flow instead of sag. None of this involves denying your achievements. It asks only that you present them with balance, choosing connection first and validation second. It's worth remembering that the impulse to oversell often comes from a natural place, the desire to be seen. Everyone wants recognition. The trick is that forcing it rarely works. It tends to push people farther away. Letting recognition arise naturally, through quiet presence, through relevant stories, through small signals of steadiness, has more power than constant reminding ever could. People respect the certainty that doesn't scream for attention. And if you're wondering what to practice tomorrow, start with this. One pause before self-promotion, one sentence rooted in learning instead of proving. Repeat that experiment across 3 conversations. Notice which feels lighter, not only for those listening, but for you as well. That's how confidence develops into something embodied rather than performed. Which brings us to an interesting layer. Confidence doesn't look just one way. People often picture it as big energy and bold expression, but in reality, it takes many forms. Sometimes it shows up as quiet conviction, other times as humor, empathy, or sheer presence. To understand how different people express it, we can map it into a set of archetypes that explain why certain personalities naturally feel magnetic. The 5 charisma archetypes. Charisma shows up in many different shapes, and researchers often point to 5 recurring archetypes that explain why people gravitate towards certain personalities. These aren't costumes to put on, they're natural styles that signal presence in specific ways. The 5 are conviction, authenticity, humor, empathy, and energy. Each one works for a different reason, and spotting which one fits you best helps you focus your efforts instead of stretching yourself across all 5 at once. The first is conviction. This is the voice of clarity. People with conviction speak as though they mean it. Steady tone, little hedging, and a sense that they trust their own words. The result is that others feel safe to trust them too. Quick self-audit. When you share an opinion, do people lean forward as if clarity itself is magnetic? Simple practice. Try explaining an idea as a 3-point story, beginning, middle, and end. Keeping a structure trains your delivery to feel grounded instead of tentative. The second is authenticity. Where conviction convinces, authenticity reassures. Authentic people don't need polish to connect. Their value comes from consistency. The way what they show matches what they feel. Instead of covering flaws, they name them. That honesty makes people exhale, because it signals there's nothing hidden. Quick self-audit. When you meet someone new, do they relax almost instantly because they sense you're not hiding anything? Practice tip. Admit one small shortcoming in conversation, like saying, "I always get names mixed up at first," with a smile. That kind of candor doesn't weaken authority. It strengthens trust. The third archetype is humor. This isn't about being the funniest person in the room or tossing around one-liners. It's about disarming tension with lightness and giving people permission to enjoy themselves. Humor is social glue. It signals intelligence, warmth, and confidence when it's used well. Quick self-audit. Do people often turn to you to lighten moments of awkward silence? Practical habit. Use light, inclusive humor that brings the group in. Comment on the shared moment rather than aiming the joke at someone. That way, laughter feels safe, not at anyone's expense. The fourth is empathy. Empathy is quieter than the others, but it's a powerful form of charisma because it makes people feel understood. Empathic people listen sharply, reflect back what they've heard, and adapt to the other person's emotional state. This doesn't mean they always agree. It means they create the feeling of being recognized. Quick self-audit. After talking with you, do others open up more rather than shutting down? Practice tip. Reflect and summarize in one sentence. That sounds frustrating, or it seems like you were excited but nervous. Simple reflections like these act like mirrors, and people feel seen. The fifth is energy. Done well, energy animates everyone else. Done poorly, it overwhelms them. Magnetic energy is enthusiasm with direction, bringing brightness into the room without bulldozing the conversation. It lifts others rather than leaving them drained. Quick self-audit. When you join a group, does the atmosphere pick up, or does it feel like you're pushing harder than everyone else combined? Practice habit. Modulate your pacing. Enter slightly slower than normal. Then add energy once you feel the group's rhythm. That prevents energy from tipping into intensity. These are the 5 archetypes people recognize intuitively, and you may already see yourself leaning toward one or two. The mistake is thinking you should master them all. No one sustains 5 personalities at once without seeming artificial. Charisma sticks when it flows from genuine alignment. Someone whose natural strength is conviction can lean fully into clarity and structure. Another who thrives in empathy can focus on listening and reflection. Both are magnetic in completely different ways. If you want this to be practical, here's a simple challenge. Pick one archetype you feel closest to and practice it deliberately for 2 weeks. Each conversation becomes your test run. For conviction, practice 3-point storytelling. For authenticity, openly share one small imperfection. For humor, drop one light, inclusive comment when tension rises. For empathy, reflect back one feeling word every time you listen. For energy, adjust pace and volume until you match and slightly lift the group. Keep it that simple. Avoid bouncing across all forms at once. Once you've done this for 2 weeks, add a second archetype. Maybe conviction is your natural baseline, so you integrate empathy to round it out. Or maybe you discover humor eases your anxiety, but you supplement it with more presence of authenticity, so it feels deeper. 2 is usually enough. Piling on more risks diluting what already works. Instead of copying everyone else's charisma, you're amplifying your own. What's interesting is that people rarely recognize their archetype without reflection. You might assume others see you one way, but the style they find magnetic in you is different. Ask a few close friends or co-workers. When I seem most engaging, what am I doing? Their answers often highlight the archetype that comes most naturally to you. Awareness like this saves time. You no longer waste effort trying to become what you're not. Another useful lens. Charisma archetypes often overlap with situational demands. Conviction resonates in moments that need direction. Pitches, leadership, conflict resolution. Authenticity shines when people are anxious and need honesty instead of showmanship. Humor releases tension in groups, diffusing hierarchy. Empathy holds power in one-on-one situations, especially when emotions are involved. Energy lifts settings where everyone is low and passive. While each type is valuable, the one that is both authentic to you and suited to the moment tends to produce the strongest impact. The trap, of course, is imitation. You may meet someone magnetic through humor and walk away thinking, I should be funnier. But if humor isn't your style, forcing it creates rejection instead of attraction. Better to double down on your real strength. The good news is that depth in one archetype builds influence far faster than shallow mimicry of many. Audiences, colleagues, and friends will always sense coherence under stress, and coherence is what they trust. To tie this together, remember, charisma isn't about covering every angle. It's choosing a base style that feels like home, practicing it until it's embodied, then slowly adding one more note when it feels natural. If you rush to display every archetype, you end up fragmented. If you play to your strengths and add carefully, you end up magnetic. Which of these resonates most with you right now? Is it the clarity of conviction, the safety of authenticity, the spark of humor, the grounding of empathy, or the lift of energy? Even asking that small checkpoint reframes how you interact tomorrow. Because when you know you're lean, every conversation becomes easier. You stop guessing at what to project and start reinforcing what already draws people to you. And while these archetypes explain what happens face to face, it's worth remembering that much of communication today doesn't unfold in physical rooms. More and more, presence is expressed through screens, messages, and digital exchanges. Those signals act just like body language, instantly shaping how people read and trust you. That shift raises a new challenge: how charisma translates when your words and reactions travel almost entirely online. The digital body language game. Here's where a new challenge shows up: the unspoken rules of the digital body language game. The cues people once drew from handshakes or posture are now being read through screens. We process timing, punctuation, camera angle, and lighting almost as if they were facial expressions in real life. The difference is that digital cues can feel exaggerated because small details suddenly carry oversized weight. A few adjustments here can tilt impressions either toward credibility or away from it in an instant. Think about video calls first. Rule 1. Keep the camera at eye level. Looking down into a laptop camera shrinks you, while looking straight across signals balance and confidence. The fix is easy. Stack your laptop on books or adjust your monitor until your eyes and lens are even. Try this before your next call and record one sentence for yourself. That 30-second test shows exactly how you come across. Rule 2 concerns lighting. Front-facing light sharpens presence because people instinctively trust clear visuals. A dim or backlit shot makes you appear uncertain or distracted. The fix here is simple. Sit facing a window or place a lamp behind your screen. This takes less than a minute, but it instantly changes the way you register to others. Rule 3 addresses eye contact. On calls, glancing into the camera simulates direct connection. When your eyes wander to another tab, the other person feels you've pulled away. The practical move: every time you answer a key point, look directly into the lens for 2 or 3 seconds. Try this with one short statement. It feels awkward at first, but on replay, it projects steady focus. Rule 4 is about movement. Gestures that spill outside the frame don't land, and restless motion looks jittery. Keep your hands visible, but contained within the box of your screen. If you're someone who uses gestures naturally, practice one steady hand movement at chest height instead of letting it drift in and out of frame. On video, contained clarity feels far stronger than scattered motion. Now shift to text and chat. Rule 5. Treat response timing as a signal. Quick replies show attentiveness, while long gaps communicate disinterest, or worse, disregard. Balance matters here. The practical tip: if you're busy, send one short acknowledgement first. Got this, I'll reply later. That microsignal avoids negative assumptions the other person might fill in on their own. Rule 6 covers punctuation and emojis. One period can feel blunt, while too many exclamation marks can seem desperate or fake. Emojis warm professional messages, but overusing them erodes credibility. The practice is to use them the way you'd use tone of voice in person, sparingly, to mark genuine emphasis or warmth. Try sending one message today with only one form of emphasis, either an exclamation or an emoji, not both. You'll notice it lands cleaner, calmer, and more trustworthy. These 6 rules may sound basic, but each one is processed like body language. The human brain is tuned to make meaning from microsignals, and in digital space, those signals are limited. That limitation raises the stakes. When someone reads your pause as indifference or your dim lighting as uncertainty, they're not being unreasonable. They're following the same circuitry that once decided whether a smile meant friend or threat. Small details, magnified by screens and timelines, influence credibility far more than you might expect. The best way to apply this is through short, deliberate experiments. Before your next call, move your camera up, then record yourself speaking a single sentence. Watch it back and compare to how you looked before. The sense of grounded presence jumps out immediately. In your next chat, replace a string of emojis with one. Notice how the message feels more intentional when you reread it later. Or in email, pause and check. Do you need that second exclamation point? Often, stripping it back feels calmer without losing warmth. Micro shifts build trust without extra effort. There's also a hidden benefit. Practicing these cues online reinforces confidence offline. Training yourself to slow replies until they feel deliberate also trains patience during in-person pauses. Eye contact through a lens makes maintaining it face-to-face less intimidating. Keeping gestures inside a small box forces intentionality, which translates into smoother delivery in real-world conversation. By refining the way you broadcast digitally, you strengthen the same core habits that shape charisma physically. Equally important is knowing when not to over-engineer. The temptation with tools like AI-assisted writing is to chase perfect phrasing every time. What often works better is letting quirks remain. A slightly uneven sentence or one misspelled word may carry more warmth than a polished paragraph that reads like software. Remember, people don't just process the words, they process whether they feel you meant them. A message that carries fingerprints of imperfection often lands with more trust than one that feels optimized beyond recognition. So use the checklist as scaffolding, not script. Adjust your lens, light your face, pace your replies, trim your marks, and then let the rest be real. Clarity plus quirks is the new signal of authenticity. It tells others, this person is not hiding behind the medium. They are showing up fully, even through a screen. And that consistency between intent and output is what modern brains read as charisma. Every message, call, or post you make is a small broadcast. It either creates alignment or contradiction. For many people, the simple act of becoming aware of this digital body language closes huge gaps. Where others seem inconsistent, you become reliable. Where others look artificial, you project ease. Silence, tone, timing, and framing are no longer invisible. They become tools you can shape with awareness instead of leaving them to chance. That awareness doesn't just help in professional meetings or social media. It lays the groundwork for everything else that builds human connection. Because beyond lighting and punctuation, what shapes relationships most deeply is the sense that someone makes you feel understood. And in the moments when that recognition happens instantly, another kind of magnetism comes forward, the psychology of instant connection. The psychology of instant connection. Why is it that sometimes, within just a few minutes of meeting someone, it feels like there's a natural pull? The conversation flows, there's a sense of ease, and it feels as though you've known them longer than you really have. Other times, no matter how polite or friendly the exchange, the interaction never seems to get beneath surface chatter. The difference often comes down to 3 psychological levers that our brains recognize quickly: mirroring, vulnerability, and curiosity. Each of these can be practiced in small, specific ways that shift how connected two people feel within moments. Let's start with mirroring. Humans instinctively reflect one another's body language, tone, and rhythm. This isn't staged, it's part of how we signal safety. Subtle alignment tells the brain, we're similar, we're safe here. If the person across from you leans forward slightly, and you naturally match that with your own lean, the nervous systems in the room sync more easily. You've probably noticed this before. When conversations feel smooth, people's gestures and tones tend to line up without effort. The simplest cue to remember here is mild posture match. Not copying, not exaggerating, but allowing your gestures and body position to echo theirs in a softer version. That small echo builds a foundation of trust faster than most people realize. Beyond posture, mirroring emotions matters even more. If someone shares something exciting, and your tone shows you're just as engaged, it validates them. If they reveal frustration, and you acknowledge it with equal seriousness, it reassures them that their feelings land safely. That emotional match is powerful precisely because it communicates understanding without needing explanation. You don't need to announce, I get you. Your response shows it, and showing often means more than saying. The second lever is vulnerability. But in truth, it's not about over-disclosure or deep secrets. The most effective version is what we might call tiny vulnerability. This means sharing something small that lowers the guard just enough to let reality show. Instead of answering, good thanks. When someone asks about your day, you might say, honestly, it's been a little overwhelming, but I'm glad we're catching up. That brief reveal does two things at once. It shows your human side and gives the other person permission to be real too. People rarely go first in sharing small truths, but when someone does, others tend to match it. Here's a simple example you can test. In a moment of introduction, add one honesty line after your surface answer. For instance, I'm a bit nervous, but I'm excited about this conversation. That phrase is balanced. It shows openness without spilling too much. In practice, tiny vulnerability works because connection thrives when people feel they're allowed to put the mask down. It tells the other person, I trust you enough to let you see a real edge of my experience. That trust breeds reciprocity, and reciprocity deepens conversation beyond trivia. Curiosity completes the triad. Nothing signals genuine interest more than a well-placed question that takes the other person's words seriously. Curiosity isn't waiting to reply. It's not about steering the conversation toward yourself. It's showing someone else they are worth exploring. A useful template here is, what part of that matters most to you? That question goes beneath description and invites the person to speak about meaning. Asking it demonstrates active listening, which signals respect in real time. Behavioral studies show that open-ended, reflective questions like this increase both the length of conversations and the depth of rapport. In other words, the more someone feels you are genuinely listening, the more they want to continue sharing. And that continuation is what forms the bond. Conversations that last tend to create durable influence. Compare it with interactions where someone barely looks up from their phone or offers flat one-word answers. The difference in outcome is dramatic not because the topics are different, but because the level of interest changes how safe people feel. When all three forces, mirroring, tiny vulnerability, and curiosity, overlap, the effect feels almost like fast-forwarding connection. Mirroring creates alignment. Vulnerability signals safety. Curiosity proves value. The combined result is that people begin to feel both recognized and understood quicker than they expect. What often gets described as instant chemistry is really a nervous system that has received enough signals to relax and engage more fully. The best part is that you can put these into practice without waiting for the perfect situation. Try this 60-second exercise the next time you're in a conversation. First, soften your body and mirror one element of the other person's posture, like leaning slightly when they do. Second, weave in one line of tiny vulnerability. Share something simple that reveals humanity. Third, ask one genuine curiosity question, something like, what part of that feels most important to you? That short sequence lets you experience how quickly the energy of the conversation shifts when all three levers are engaged. What you'll likely notice is that these tools work not because they trick anyone, but because they reduce distance. Distance is what often makes conversations feel stiff or shallow. Closeness happens the moment both people sense mutual trust, and these micro-cues accelerate that shift. They create the conditions for connection that might otherwise take weeks of interaction to achieve. And because the signals are authentic, not forced, they hold up over time instead of wearing thin. Of course, the opposite is also true. If you avoid vulnerability entirely, keep posture rigidly different, and rush to speak rather than ask, the unspoken signal is, I'm closed off. Stay at the surface. Conversations held at the surface rarely blossom into deeper rapport, even when friendly exchanges are happening. Without recognition, safety, and value, the nervous system never relaxes enough to register true connection. That's why thinking of this triad as a set of small habits, not dramatic gestures, makes sense. You don't need to calculate every motion. Just remember, a mild posture match, one tiny vulnerability, and one meaningful question can transform the tone of interaction. That's not performance, it's alignment. By leaning into these microsignals, you aren't pretending to be someone else. You're highlighting the cues that human brains have trusted for generations. Look back at your own connections that felt immediate and memorable. Chances are, those three ingredients were at play, even if neither you nor the other person realized it. You mirrored some gesture or tone. One of you made a small, honest comment beyond the script, and someone asked a question that reached beyond facts into meaning. The formula works because it matches how humans are wired to decide whether someone feels like us or not. As you begin to experiment with these elements, what often changes first is how people respond to you emotionally. They soften, they lean in, they share more. That reaction is feedback. It shows the connection is real, not imagined. The simplicity of these tools makes them easy to apply right away, but the impact compounds with practice. Before long, you'll find many interactions feel warmer and more natural from the start. And it's important to see these principles for what they are. Not manipulation, but navigation. They allow you to meet people where they are, to show up more fully yourself, and to remove the friction that usually weighs early conversations down. In doing so, you create not only fast rapport, but also deeper trust that lasts beyond first impressions. The natural question that follows is, once initial connection is made, how does it grow into influence? Connection is about resonance, but influence requires a different kind of foundation. It depends less on clever techniques and more on the mindset you bring to every exchange. How you approach others, what you expect from interactions, and whether your values translate outward. This shift is not about winning someone over. It's about how you frame the role of your presence when you engage. Modern mindsets that build lasting influence. Modern influence doesn't come from clever arguments or constant persuasion. It starts with a simple mindset. Stop convincing, start inviting. That shift changes the dynamic instantly. Convincing feels like pressure. It makes people guard themselves. Inviting, on the other hand, allows space. It communicates, here's where I stand, and you're welcome to join me if it fits. The difference matters because people resist feeling pushed, but they lean into choices that feel like their own. This idea can be broken into a two-step formula. First, state your stance clearly. Second, invite response with open choice. That's it. 2 steps, but they alter the psychology of every exchange. Take a workplace example. Instead of saying, we have to go with my proposal, it's the best option, you say, here's the direction I believe makes sense, and I'd like to hear if it resonates with you before we move forward. The stance is clear, and the invitation feels open. Here's how it works in friendship or dating. Instead of saying, we should absolutely go here this weekend, it's definitely better than anywhere else, you say, I'm planning to check out this spot, and if it sounds good to you, I'd love for you to come. Same clarity, paired with choice. No pressure, no sales pitch. Just an open door. Invites give agency, and agency is the currency of influence. Research on trust and cooperation shows people feel more committed when they sense freedom in agreeing rather than pressure to comply. In other words, they lean in more when they decide to, not when they're forced to. That means influence has less to do with proving your case, and more to do with creating space where others can step in on their terms. Here's a tool you can use right now, the 6-month no-brainer question. It's often used in interviews or negotiations, but it applies broadly. If 6 months from now you were looking back on this decision, what would need to have happened for you to feel it was a no-brainer? That phrase does 2 subtle things. First, it shows you already respect the other person's perspective. Second, it invites them to define success in their own terms. Instead of convincing, you're asking for alignment. That makes them partners in the process rather than targets of persuasion. This shift shows up everywhere once you start noticing it. Think of a manager in a meeting. The one who hammers away at their idea with charts and repetition usually comes across as pushy. Even if they're right, the energy feels transactional. Contrast that with a manager who explains their vision succinctly, then adds, "Here's what this could solve. What do you see from your side?" The reaction changes. People feel ownership. They support not because they lost an argument, but because they helped build the decision. It's the same in daily life. One person turns a conversation into a contest. "You should agree with me because I've got the best evidence." Another frames it differently. "Here's how I see it. If it connects with you, great, let's move forward." That frame leaves the listener relaxed instead of defensive. It's the difference between walking into a room that feels like a debate stage and walking into one that feels like an invitation. People naturally prefer the second. In relationships, the effect becomes even more visible. When someone spends a first date trying to present themselves like a brochure, reciting accomplishments, underscoring every credential, it almost inevitably feels exhausting. The implicit message is, "Please be impressed." That typically creates distance instead of attraction. By contrast, when someone shares pieces of who they are openly, explains what they enjoy or what they're looking for, and leaves space for the other person to step in, the entire tone softens. A line as simple as, "I'm excited to see where this goes, and I'd like you to come along if it feels right for you," carries far more quiet power than a list of selling points. That signals ease, and ease is more magnetic than performance. Clarity of purpose is what grounds this style. An invitation works only when others understand what they're being invited to. If someone is vague, "You should get involved with this project, it's really good," there's nothing to grasp. But if they say, "I'm working on this because I believe it solves X, and I'd love your input if it matters to you too," the offer suddenly makes sense. The stance is transparent, and the choice is left open. Clear, authentic intention creates trust because people see what's real without needing to decode it. It's easy to forget how often people default to convincing. They over-explain, oversell, or overwhelm with evidence, thinking they're strengthening their position. In reality, they're eroding it. Every extra push implies suspicion. "I'm not sure you'll agree on your own, so I need to pile this on." That sense of pressure cues resistance. By contrast, a calm, clear statement of direction plus genuine invitation flips the script. It communicates, "I trust my stance, and I trust you to choose." That message lands because trust breeds trust. A practical way to test this is to notice when you feel the urge to prove. In that moment, pause and replace a layer of argument with a question. Instead of saying, "Here's every reason why you should join this," try, "Here's what I'm aiming for. How does that sound from your end?" Or in casual plans, instead of, "You really need to try this, it's the best," say, "I'm headed here, you're welcome if it fits." Each time you make that switch, observe how others ease into the response. That's proof that invitation creates engagement without pressure. You'll find this approach especially valuable in negotiations. The instinct to argue every clause or defend every point creates tension. Using the 6-month no-brainer question shifts the energy. You're not demanding compliance, you're aligning outcomes. People don't just agree reluctantly, they feel ownership in the solution. And ownership is the real anchor of lasting influence. This is the mindset that travels well across all areas. Professional meetings, personal relationships, collaborations, even online interactions. It's not about shrinking your stance. Clarity still matters. The point is to pair clarity with openness. One without the other loses power. Clarity without choice feels like pressure. Choice without clarity feels like emptiness. Together, they create influence that sustains. What stays with people long after a conversation isn't the strength of your arguments, but the quality of their experience with you. If they felt boxed in, they remember pressure. If they felt invited, they remember choice. And because choice is linked with trust, those are the moments that compound into long-term influence. The mindset can be summed up simply. Every interaction either constricts or expands the other person's agency. When you expand it, they associate you with freedom, not force. And freedom always feels safer to follow. Of course, not everyone who understands these dynamics uses them for the same reasons. The same principles that create authentic connection can also be bent into manipulation when intent strays from integrity. Influence becomes force disguised as freedom. And that's where the nature of charisma itself takes a darker turn. The shadow side, how charisma gets twisted. Charisma isn't always the glowing force we like to believe it is. The same qualities that inspire, attract, and build connection can also be twisted when intent is warped. This is the shadow side, where charm stops being authenticity and starts becoming a tool for control. The problem isn't the traits themselves, but the way they can be weaponized. Confidence, conviction, warmth, and presence, all of these can be copied, exaggerated, or staged. When that happens, what looks magnetic at first eventually corrodes trust over time. One way this shadow side appears is through manipulative charm. Skilled readers of people know which cues will light up the brain's circuits for trust. They lock steady eye contact, nod at the right times, sprinkle in compliments, and echo your gestures. On the surface, this feels like connection. But beneath, it's calculated performance. The goal isn't to make you feel safe, it's to secure influence. And because our nervous system leans on emotion before logic, it often takes time before alarm bells ring. By then, the manipulator already has influence in place. Another form is over-reliance on projected certainty. During uncertain times, humans crave leaders who sound sure of themselves. When someone speaks with crisp clarity, "I know the way forward," the brain interprets that confidence as competence. Yet without integrity beneath it, that voice of conviction doesn't empower, it dominates. History and research both show that charisma can be used for harmful ends when it isn't grounded in character. The outer traits are identical to authentic inspiration: posture, pacing, quiet confidence, vision. The difference is whether they're used to guide others forward or to bind them into dependence. In personal relationships, something similar happens. Narcissistic individuals often lead with overwhelming charm. They seem attentive, energetic, and tuned in. They mirror your emotions and pace, so conversations feel effortless, almost electric. But as time unfolds, the warmth grows conditional, offered only when it serves their interests. Empathy disappears when your needs compete with theirs. What once felt magnetic begins to unravel, and the realization sets in. The attraction was built on strategy, not sincerity. If there's a common thread in charisma gone toxic, it's this: authenticity is missing. True charisma flows from congruence, inner state and outer signal in alignment. Twisted charisma runs only on mimicry. Confidence becomes arrogance. Conviction becomes rigid dogma. Empathy becomes manipulation. In early stages, it feels convincing because the performance is practiced. But over time, cracks appear, and the incongruence forces people to question what they originally felt. To keep this clearer, think of it as a checklist of red flags. 5 signals often show up where charm begins to warp: inconsistent behavior, refusal to apologize, over-control, excessive flattery, and lack of transparency. Inconsistent behavior is one of the easiest tells. For instance, a supervisor preaches teamwork, but dismisses any idea that's not their own. The contradiction lingers in your gut not because of bad ideas, but because words and actions don't match. That gap erodes trust. Refusal to apologize is another. A person who always deflects blame, who never pauses to own a mistake, signals fragility beneath the confidence. It may start small, dodging responsibility for lateness, but eventually grows into a refusal to take accountability for larger harm. True leaders strengthen trust by repairing breaches. Performers avoid repair at all costs. Over-control shows up when someone frames every choice as theirs to dictate. It might look like micromanaging every task, interrupting others to reassert the narrative, or treating boundaries as negotiable only when convenient. What may appear as strong leadership at first slowly reveals itself as domination. Excessive flattery tends to feel good in small bursts, but its shadow is dependence. If every comment you make receives overblown praise, it stops being affirmation and starts being bait. The goal is not appreciation, but to hook you into craving their approval. And then there's lack of transparency. When promises are vague, motives stay hidden, or key details remain blurred, you're left in constant guesswork. Transparency reveals real values. Opaque charm replaces clarity with performance, protecting the manipulator rather than the relationship. These signals are not about judging quickly. They are reminders to pause. Because charisma can flood the brain with warmth before logic has a chance to weigh in, it helps to slow the process. Before committing trust, you can ask yourself 3 grounding questions. Are their actions consistent with their words? Do they accept feedback without deflecting? Are they open about motives? Or do they keep shifting explanations? When at least 2 of these answers lean negative, it's a warning. Worth listening to. Online, the shadow effect magnifies. Influencers and public voices can polish presentation to a degree that looks indistinguishable from authenticity. Camera-level eye contact, carefully crafted pauses, practiced empathy. The signals that trigger instant trust can all be packaged. Many creators use these tools authentically, but others exploit them to push false solutions or pursue shallow gain. What matters most isn't whether their delivery looks smooth, but whether their long-term actions align with the claims. The internet makes charisma scalable, but without integrity beneath it, that charisma collapses at speed. The larger danger lies in how willing groups are to overlook these signals. Humans crave inspiration and belonging. When someone offers that in a moment of uncertainty, people may knowingly silence their doubts in exchange for comfort. It's not only about the charismatic individual, but also about collective willingness to forget to check for integrity. Communities, workplaces, even whole societies sometimes opt for surface-level certainty over the harder work of assessing values. But there's a safeguard anyone can practice. Influence grounded in authenticity looks different. It admits mistakes, invites feedback, holds motives in the open. It allows people to grow stronger inside the relationship instead of smaller. Research on ethics and leadership highlights this consistently. When charisma is paired with accountability and transparency, trust grows. When divorced from those anchors, trust eventually collapses. The difference isn't in appearance, but in endurance. So the challenge becomes practical. Notice how charisma makes you feel, then slow down long enough to test it. Feel drawn to someone's confidence? Ask if their choices match their claims. Not sure about their warmth? Look at how they treat people when no attention is on them. Impressed by their vision? Watch if they adjust to input or silence dissent. Pausing long enough to test congruence protects against performance disguised as integrity. What you end up realizing is that charisma itself is neutral. It amplifies what already exists inside someone. Paired with character, it builds trust that strengthens over time. Emptied of character, it burns fast, then collapses. Which means the real measure isn't how magnetic someone feels in the first few moments. It's how safe and consistent they remain months or years later. And when you apply this lens, the red flags become easier to see. A voice that never admits fault, a stance that silences input, charm that flatters too much, motives hidden behind polish. These are signals not to be ignored. They remind us that attraction can be staged, but integrity cannot. In every case, sustainable influence depends not on performance, but on truth. Holding on to that thought makes one final point clear. The most powerful form of magnetism arises not from tricks or packaging, but from alignment. When outer confidence mirrors inner truth, people feel it deeply. And that same alignment is what we turn to next. Here's the core takeaway. Real influence doesn't come from tricks or polish. It comes from alignment, when your signals match what you actually feel and believe. That congruence builds ease, and ease is what draws people in. So here's your challenge. In your next conversation, add one more sentence of realness than you normally would. Afterward, jot a quick note. What felt different in your body, and how did the other person respond? Try the experiment, then drop a short comment about what shifted for you. That one small act turns theory into practice, and practice into presence.